Hey everyone, I am doing this video for one specific student who has been absent a bit in my Intro to CAD class, but I'm going to just put this publicly available on YouTube for anyone that it helps. So previously, as a bit of a preamble, we talked a little bit about how to move around in Onshape, like what all of the different buttons do, the way we can recover things if we lose them or zoom out, zoom in too much, those sorts of things. We also talked a little bit about making sketches and how after selecting the sketch button, you have to select a plane, a two-dimensional plane that you're putting it on. And then you have to draw it and be careful because when you select a tool, just because you draw the thing that you intended to draw doesn't mean the tool is unselected. You have to like unselect it yourself. And so that's important because otherwise you make like, instead of one rectangle, you make like 4 or 5 rectangles. And we also talked about how this sketch is not complete until we press the green check mark. That saves our progress, that keeps our sketch here. I can also go back over here to sketch 1. I can press edit, right? So I right click on it to get back into it and make more changes to it if I decide, you know what, I've changed my mind. I want something different. I want to change it a little bit. So you're not stuck with a sketch just because you've pressed the green check mark. You can always do something else with it. You could also even delete it from here if you're like, I just want to get rid of it completely. I do not like it. On second thought, no, thank you. So keep that in mind. Things don't need to be perfect the first time you create the sketch. You just need to get something on the canvas and you can work from there. There's always ways to undo or redo or edit or delete or whatever. So from here, I wanted to introduce the dimension tool. So the dimension tool is this one up here. It's the diagonal double-sided arrow. And what it does is it allows us to take the dimension of whatever our drawing is. Something I forgot to mention, keep in mind your drawing needs to be enclosed. It needs to be an enclosed shape. Also, if you cannot find the dimension tool, I have very small icons so that I can see kind of everything spaced out. If you do not see the dimension tool, go ahead and search tools, which you have to search for it while you have a sketch open and are editing it, because the tools available to you change whether you're in a sketch or not in a sketch. I learned that recently. Or I learned it, I knew it, but I didn't know that applied to the search bar as well. So if you need to, you can search dimension and you can find it here. And just like the other tools, keep in mind that just because you have used the dimension tool doesn't mean it's no longer selected, and you need to make sure you unselect the tool afterwards. So for this rectangle, I am going to go ahead and bring these 2 dimensions out. I want to take the, I chose the top and the side. Just make sure that you're doing like adjacent sides and not opposite sides, because obviously in a rectangle the opposite sides are the same, so who cares? And so what I did, I'll just undo real quick so that I can show off. Edit, all right. So dimension tool, I click on the side I want to take the dimension of, and then I bring things out. I'm not dragging, I unselect, or like I clicked and then I dragged out, and I click again, and it lets me input something else. I can say, okay, well, I want it to actually be 2 inches. And I did the same thing with this guy. Okay, this one, I want it to be 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. Okay, cool. And you can go back in, I'm gonna unselect the dimension tool. You can double click on these numbers and go back in later and you can edit them. So now I have a rectangle where the height is half as big as the length. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop editing the sketch. This is where I want to be for now. I want to introduce a new tool called the variable tool. And notice the variable tool is available here when I am not editing a sketch. Important. Once again, the tools switch. The tools available to you switch when you're editing a sketch versus not editing a sketch. So you need to not be editing a sketch to find the variable tool. Shout out to Bria, who I learned that because she was having struggles. Okay, so I'm going to use this variable tool, and much like the sketch tool, I get this little window that pops up, and it asks me to do a bunch of things. Assigned versus measured, length, angle, number, any. So I don't want to get too into all this. Obviously, we could measure a lot of different things. We could assign a lot of different things. Things can have angles, things can have lengths. We can talk about number as in number of sides in a polygon. We could just, grab bag it and say, hey, just don't worry about what it is. You figure it out later. And Onshape's generally pretty good at doing that. I am going to go ahead and leave it on assigned in length because we are going to tell Onshape how big we want these lengths to be. Now, you can also edit the name of it. So I'm going to go ahead and call this size because it is the size of my rectangle, or it's going to dictate the size of my rectangle. And notice here it says hashtag size equals 0 inches. That is how, that is how Onshape chooses to denote variables versus like other named things. Like I could choose to name my sketch rectangle, which I'll probably do later just to show off. And so if you put a hashtag in front of something, Onshape knows that you are trying to talk about a variable. I'm going to go ahead and make this one 2, so 2 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and press the green check mark. Here, I have my variable size 2 inches. I'm going to rename sketch 1, like I said, rectangle. You can also open the edit menu and from here, change the name if you want. Okay, so I have this rectangle. I have this rectangle. I want to input the variable in some way, shape, or form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what? This length, instead of having it 1.5, I want it to be size of the size variable. Now it's getting a little upset. It's like, oh, you need to create a variable. That variable doesn't exist. And I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't exist? It's right here. Onshape has ordering, the same way any programming language would, or the vast majority of them do, where you have to say something exists and you need to assign it some value before you begin using it. So I'm going to get out of here. The problem is in our order, we've got some stuff they call default geometry. So it's just like the planes and the origin, so the exact middle. Onshape always has that. You can hide them, but I like seeing them. Personally, I like seeing them. But we can't really change the order there. That's always up top. But the size variable, I need to move it, and I literally just drag it up ahead to be like, okay, this comes before my rectangle, so I can now use my size variable to talk about my rectangle. So keep that in mind. Whenever you're making variables, maybe you have multiple variables, but whenever you're making variables, they must be on top of whatever is using them. And I would just say, as a good rule of thumb, just put them at the top of everything, right? Even if you don't use the variable until way later, I don't want you thinking about like, oh, well, should I put this variable after this sketch and before this one and blah, blah, blah. Just put them all up top so you don't have to worry about any of that. It'll always work if all your variables are up top. Okay, so let's go back into rectangle. Let's edit. I'm going to now call this size. And then this one, it was, remember, I had 1.5 and 3. So this length was twice as big as the width was previously. So I'm going to try and maintain that, that ratio of like, oh, this is twice as big as this. So what I need to do is I want to say this length should be 2 times my size. Notice the asterisk, the little star icon, I'm using that to signify multiplication. That's how Onshape understands multiplication. Okay, cool. So why would I do this? Why would I do this? Well, now I can change how big the rectangle is while keeping it the same ratio. Like I can keep it so that it's always twice as long as it is tall. I can do all of that with the click of a button. I can go into size and I could say, you know what, instead of 2 inches, make it 3 inches. And it enlarges both parts of the rectangle at the same time, both the height and the length at the same time. Now, not too much for us, right? Like this doesn't help us all that much because our shape is so simple. But you can imagine as you're making something more and more complex, it's a good idea to tie a variable to all of the different dimensions of that thing because otherwise you're going to have to individually change each and everything when you want to change the scale of whatever object you're working on. So if you're making something complicated, like let's say you're trying to make like a chess piece, and you're like, wait a second, I made it too big. I need to scale it down so that it fits on my 3D printer or it makes sense on a chessboard. And then you didn't use variables and you have to go into each individual element you made for the chess piece where it's like, okay, well, here's the dome on top. Here's the like arc on the bottom. Here's the size of the circle on the bottom, and you have to go in and individually tweak everything. And that gets ugly. So the variable lets us just kind of get around that in a very nice, elegant, convenient way. Okay, that's great. Why does my, okay, that's why that looked that way. All right. Let's get on to the exciting stuff, which is extruding. So right now we have a 2D shape. Boring. You know, that's not what we're here to do. Extrude, this tool. Extrude, click on the shape I want to turn into a 3D object. And I now have a 3D shape. Simple as that. Easy, easy. So just keep in mind, the crux of what's going on is that you need to have a sketch. You need to have a 2D foundation for your three-dimensional shape. You have to have a 2D foundation for your three-dimensional shape. I'm going to go ahead and use the variable again here. So I have this thing, I'm saying depth. So depth is just saying like, oh, how much? You're extruding by how much. There is a opposite direction. So you can extrude in one direction or another. New, add, remove, intersect. We're going to get to that in just a second. But for now, let's not worry too much. I'm going to go ahead and call this box because that's what it is. So I've got a box. I have a nice box. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all I'm doing here. Do I get like a nice there? Yeah, look at that. Okay, so now remember I tied the variable to how much I extrude the box. So that changes with the variable too, right? So I have effectively made it so that I can shrink or expand everything with one single change. I can just say, oh, I want the variable to be a different size, and everything else follows suit. Now, we're going to start getting into the interesting stuff, right? We've made a 3D shape. We have created some sort of, we've used a positive construction method where we added material. We can now affect this shape, this box that we've made. I've already gotten kind of like, I've gone cross-eyed with this. Where is it? Okay. Now what I want to do is either add or subtract material to this shape. So here's what I'm going to choose to do. I am going to make another sketch. I'm going to choose specifically to sketch on one of the faces of my box. Remember, a sketch wants a 2D face. It does not have to be this giant plane. It does not have to be the ether that exists innately in Onshape. It can be a face of an object you have made. So I'm going to say I want it on. I want that the sketch to be located on this, on the face of my box. I'm gonna do something kind of nice. I'm gonna try and Oh man, it's not. It's not gonna. I mean, it's ugly. You know what? That's not a good idea either. I'm gonna try and get as centered as I can. I'll teach you guys at a later point how you get it to be exactly centered. But I've got it relatively well centered, and I have it not touching the edges. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay. Call this a circle. Can't imagine why I wouldn't. Okay, so circle here. Great, wonderful. I have a sketch on my box. Would you look at that? How interesting, how exciting. Sketch on the box, wonderful. Now I can go ahead and I can extrude specifically, yikes, specifically this. So I can go to my extrude tool again. I can come here, and here's where things get kind of interesting. I can choose to add additional material. Notice here it says add instead of new. I can choose to add material, but notice this here. I can choose to remove material. I can take things away from my box. I can cut a hole as well. So I can add material to my object. I can also subtract material from my object. And keep in mind, we tied the length of the box to our variable. Remember, it was twice as big as size. So if I do that, I've made a hole. I've made a hole. So you can do both. You can add material, you can subtract material. Keep in mind, if you're doing the add or subtract material, this direction ends up really mattering, right? I want to add material in this direction, or I want to subtract material in this other direction, right? So you need to make sure you toggle this and this is correct and appropriate. Okay, cool. The last thing that I want to cover that will kind of get us caught up to speed as to where we are in class is the use of the fillet tool. And so this is just kind of like, if you look carefully, it's rounding edges. And that's exactly, oh God. I'm so happy the zoom to fit button exists. Okay, so that's exactly what it does. And importantly, when you use the fillet tool, you can choose as many edges as you want. You do not need to make separate fillets. You do not need to click on this a bunch of times, on this tool a bunch of times for each individual edge you want to change. You get to say, okay, I want the, oh. All right, well, I'll fix that. Don't worry, I'll fix that. I'll fix that. Now, it's yelling at me right now. It's yelling at me because I have this thing called radius here. This dictates how much it like kind of smooths down the edge. So right now the radius is 1.5, which means I'm smoothing down the edge a lot. I'm smoothing down the edge so much that it would cut into the actual hole that I've made here. So that's obviously not good. I don't know if I want to turn this into something involving my variable. I'm just gonna, we can play with it, but for now, I'm gonna do something much more reasonable. I'm gonna do 1/2 inch. So you'll notice these sides are rounded, or these edges are rounded. And they're rounded, you know, enough to be noticeable, but not so much that it cuts into the rest of what I have going on. And, you know, Onshape was yelling at me earlier about like how this is not okay. It was like, no, 1.5 inches, Eric, get out of here, you can't do that. 0.5 inches, fine. Okay, perfectly reasonable. How would I'm gonna just go ahead and do this. I'm gonna say 1/4 times size, just so I can like shrink and expand it and see what happens. Okay, is that always gonna be good? Will that always be good? Let's edit the variable down to a measly like 0.2 inches. Did I break anything? The circle's gone, so that's interesting because I didn't tie that to my variable. Okay, all right. Let's go to like 10 inches. Let's do something crazy. Okay. All right. Okay. It all makes sense. It all makes sense. Yeah. So this is what happens when you don't tie something to your variable. I'm glad I actually uh, showed that off. I wasn't planning on it. Now we did tie how deep it goes to our variable, right? So we still cut all the way through, but we're not in the correct spot. We're, there, we have to think about this. We have to wrap our heads around what is going on and why and how. But that's for another time. As for now, I think we're caught all up to speed. We don't have to do anything else. If you've watched this video, if you've hopefully followed along at home, then you're where you should be. All right. Well, that does it for me. I will see you guys in class, and to anyone else who was watching, I hope this was helpful for you. All right, take care.